This video is sponsored by Aura.
You're watching Northern Crimes.
Washington State. It's a region known for its breathtaking landscapes and pioneering spirit. But beneath the surface of its natural beauty lies a much darker history. Over the decades, this corner of the Pacific Northwest has been home to crimes that have left communities shaken and questions unanswered. From cases steeped in greed and obsession to those marked by ingenuity and desperation. Each one reveals a stark duality, the clash between humanity's brightest and darkest instincts. This is the true story of 5 notorious crimes from Washington State, and this is Northern Crimes. Before we get started, did you know that every email, every online account, every piece of personal information, it's all vulnerable to those who know how to exploit it? In 2024, over 1 billion records were exposed in data breaches, compromising the personal information of millions of Americans. These breaches often included sensitive details such as home addresses, phone numbers, and financial data, which were frequently scraped and sold by data brokers. Imagine a stranger knowing your address or your child's school just because your data was sold online. This growing threat is why today's video sponsor, Aura, exists, to give you the tools you need to stay ahead of cyber criminals and keep your family safe. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety solution that actively protects you and your loved ones. It monitors your personal information, including social security numbers, across billions of data points like the dark web and public records, alerting you to potential identity theft in real time. Aura also helps you opt out of data broker lists, offers a VPN for secure browsing, and includes a password manager to create and store strong passwords. Plus, with real-time alerts for data breaches, you'll be the first to know if your information is at risk. On top of that, Aura provides up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, so you're covered even if the worst happens. Imagine the peace of mind knowing that Aura is constantly working in the background, protecting your identity, finances, and privacy so you can focus on what really matters. So take control of your digital safety today. To get started, click the link in the description or go to aura.com/northerncrimes to try 2 weeks for free. Because in today's world, you can't afford to leave your safety to chance. Now, back to the video. Seattle, 2019. A city evolving with innovation and a thriving tech sector. But amidst the digital boom, a sinister case of cyberstalking emerged. An anonymous person targeted a young woman, sending relentless threats that soon extended to her loved ones. What began as a personal vendetta grew into a calculated campaign of fear. This is the story of the Seattle Cyberstalker, a chilling intersection of obsession and technology in the digital age. Sumit Garg, a privacy consultant, appeared outwardly successful, but his private life revealed a darker side. In early 2019, he shared an apartment in Seattle's Belltown neighborhood with his wife and a young woman who would later become known as, quote, Victim 1. Their ordinary arrangement quickly turned hostile as Garg's behavior escalated. Verbal abuse, controlling outbursts, and explicit advances created an unsettling environment, to say the least. By June 2019, a physical confrontation forced Victim 1 to move out. She filed for a domestic violence protection order, but instead of stopping, Garg intensified his efforts. Days after the separation, he applied for a job at her workplace, a move that was disturbingly calculated. Denied employment, Garg weaponized his technological expertise, launching a campaign of harassment that left her in constant fear. Over the next month, cryptic messages referencing personal details of her life flooded victim one's inbox. The harassment escalated, with violent threats accompanied by photographs of her apartment lobby. Each message came from anonymized accounts, ensuring that she never felt safe. So, with options running out, victim one turned to the Seattle police. Detectives analyzed the email's metadata and uncovered a pattern pointing to a single perpetrator. A breakthrough finally came when surveillance footage captured Garg entering victim one's building at the exact time one of the threatening emails was sent. This visual evidence connected him directly to the crimes. Garg's wife, initially supportive of him, eventually became a key witness. Under questioning, she revealed that Garg had instructed her to destroy evidence, including clothing linked to the surveillance footage. She also provided messages and documents tying him to the cyberstalking accounts. Federal authorities, including the United States Secret Service, joined the investigation. Their digital forensics uncovered Garg's elaborate operation. Dozens of fake email accounts used to send thousands of harassing messages over 2 years. The scale of his coordination was staggering, underscoring his calculated efforts to evade detection. Prosecutors presented an overwhelming case against Garg, emphasizing the psychological toll on victim one. She testified about the unrelenting fear that consumed her life, stating,
"I felt like I was being watched everywhere I went."
Evidence, including surveillance footage, digital records, and testimony from Garg's wife, left no doubt about his guilt. In July 2024, Garg was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison after being convicted on charges of conspiracy to engage in cyberstalking and violating protection orders. The judge called his actions, quote, "deliberate, malicious, and devastating." Tacoma, Washington, May 24th, 1935. A typical spring afternoon turned to panic as 9-year-old George Weyerhaeuser vanished on his way home from school. George, heir to one of America's wealthiest lumber dynasties, disappeared without a trace. That evening, the Weyerhaeuser family received a ransom note demanding $200,000 in unmarked bills. The message was clear: deliver the money within 5 days or face unimaginable consequences. The family was thrust into a high-stakes game of survival where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. But who were the culprits behind this brazen crime, and how far would they go to get what they wanted? The Weyerhaeuser family's wealth made them a prime target in the turbulent era of the Great Depression. George, an ordinary boy by all appearances, had no way of knowing that the short walk from school to home would thrust him into national headlines. His kidnappers were a pair of desperate men, Harmon Whaley and William Daynard, both hardened by lives of crime and time spent in the Idaho State Penitentiary. They, along with Whaley's wife Margaret, devised a meticulous plan to abduct the young heir and extort his family. The ransom note delivered to the Weyerhaeuser home was as chilling as it was direct. Instructions for delivering the money, coded messages to be exchanged in the personal ads of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, and a warning not to involve the police. Over the next 5 days, the family followed the cryptic orders, each step more unnerving than the last. The ransom exchange was orchestrated with a precision that bordered on theatrical. On May 29th, George's father was directed to drive along Highway 99 to a desolate spot, leave the ransom money in the car, and walk away without looking back. Moments later, George was freed unharmed, a miraculous end to the family's nightmare, but the kidnappers' escape wouldn't last. The FBI and local law enforcement quickly mobilized, tracing the ransom money using serial numbers meticulously recorded before the exchange. As the marked bill surfaced across the country, the net tightened. Investigators tracked Whaley and Daynard through their careless spending, uncovering their trail piece by piece. The pivotal break came when Margaret Whaley, under pressure, confessed to her involvement and provided critical details about her accomplices. The FBI's methodical work led to the capture of Harmon Whaley and William Daynard, both of whom were found in possession of evidence tying them to the kidnapping. The three conspirators faced swift justice. Harmon Whaley and William Daynard were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, while Margaret Whaley received a lesser sentence for her cooperation. Together, they were held accountable for a crime that had gripped the nation. As for George, the ordeal left a mark, but he grew to lead a life of resilience, eventually becoming the chairman of the Weyerhaeuser Company board. The Weyerhaeuser kidnapping underscores how desperation and greed can lead to the unthinkable. It also raises a haunting question. In a world driven by power and wealth, how do we protect the most vulnerable among us? Renton, Washington, 1969. A quiet city shaken by a string of shocking crimes. Over 2 years, 4 young lives were lost in a series of attacks that left the community in gripping fear. At the center of it all was a young man whose actions defied comprehension, leading investigators on a harrowing journey to uncover the truth. This is the story of Gary Gene Grant, one of the Pacific Northwest's most chilling cases. Gary Gene Grant grew up in Renton, Washington in the 1950s and 60s. His upbringing was challenging, marked by economic hardship and family struggles. By his teenage years, he dropped out of school, isolated and grappling with emotional and mental health challenges. After a short and troubled stint in the military, Grant returned home, where his behavior took a disturbing turn. In December 1969, 19-year-old Carol Adele Erickson disappeared while walking home. Her death would be the first in a series of incidents that left residents reeling. Then, in September 1970, 17-year-old Joanne Mary Zuloff was tragically killed in an accident that bore striking similarities. Investigators noted troubling patterns, but struggled to piece together the puzzle. Then, in April 1971, the case took an even darker turn when 2 young boys, Scott Andrews and Bradley Lyons, went missing. Their disappearance heightened fears, and when their bodies were discovered, the need to find answers became urgent. The case broke wide open when a blood-stained hunting knife was found near the scene of the boys' disappearance. Investigators traced the knife through several owners, eventually leading them to Gary Gene Grant. Under questioning, Grant initially claimed memory lapses, but later provided information about the crimes. His arrest brought relief to a community that was desperate for justice. The evidence against him, including shoe prints, a weapon, and his own admissions, was overwhelming. Investigators worked carefully to ensure a solid case while navigating legal challenges over how some evidence had been obtained. Grant's trial began in August 1971. Prosecutors presented detailed evidence, including physical items and testimony linking him to the crimes. Although his defense team argued that he wasn't mentally fit, a forensic evaluation determined that Grant was capable of standing trial. On August 25, 1971, Gary Gene Grant was convicted of multiple counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The outcome provided closure to families in a grieving community, but left lingering questions about the events that led up to the crimes. The Renton Murders underscore the stark duality of human nature, the capacity for unimaginable violence, alongside the resilience of a community united in a pursuit of justice. Decades later, Gary Grant's crimes remain a haunting chapter in Renton's history, reminding us of the delicate balance between good and evil and the need for vigilance in the face of darkness. Seattle, July 7th, 1993. An electric night in a city pulsating with the grunge music revolution. Amidst the vibrant energy of the punk scene, tragedy struck. Mia Zapata, lead singer of the Gits, a rising force in Seattle's punk movement, was brutally murdered. The discovery of her body on a quiet Central District street sent shockwaves through the community. Who could commit such a heinous act against someone beloved by so many? This is the story of Mia Zapata's murder, a crime that haunted Seattle for decades before justice was served. Mia Zapata was no ordinary artist. Known for her passionate voice and magnetic stage presence, she was the heart and soul of the Gits. Their energetic performances and raw lyrics captured the spirit of Seattle's punk scene. Fresh off a successful West Coast tour, the band seemed poised for stardom, but that dream came to an abrupt and very violent end. After a night out with friends, Zapata decided to walk home, and somewhere along the way, she was attacked. The details were horrifying. She was beaten, raped, and strangled to death with the drawstrings of her hoodie. Her body was left on the street, a stark and tragic contrast to the vibrant life she'd led. The murder devastated her friends and fans, sparking an outpouring of grief and anger. Yet, despite efforts to find her killer, including benefits and fundraisers led by Joan Jett and Kurt Cobain to hire private investigators, the case went cold. For nearly a decade, Mia Zapata's murder was a painful mystery. Then, in 2003, a breakthrough came in the form of DNA technology. Saliva that had been collected from her body was analyzed and matched to Jesus Mezquia, a Cuban immigrant living in Florida who had no known connection to Zapata or Seattle's music scene. Investigators pieced together a chilling portrait of Mezquia, a man with a serious history of violence against women. The randomness of the crime was as shocking as its brutality. Zapata had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Mezquia had taken advantage of that moment to commit an unthinkable act. Mezquia was arrested and extradited to Seattle. In 2004, he stood trial for Mia Zapata's murder. The evidence was overwhelming, with DNA tying him directly to the crime. The trial revealed the senseless cruelty of the act, leaving no doubt about his guilt. Mezquia was convicted and sentenced to 36 years in prison. For the friends and family of Mia Zapata, the conviction brought some closure, but the void left by her death could never be filled. Mia Zapata's murder remains a haunting reminder of how quickly violence can shatter even the most vibrant lives. Her death galvanized a movement, inspiring the creation of Home Alive, an organization dedicated to teaching self-defense and combating violence. But questions still linger. How many other crimes remain unsolved, and how can we ensure safety in a world where darkness often strikes at random? Mia's legacy endures, both as an artist whose voice will never fade, and as a symbol of resilience against violence. Camano Island, Washington, 2008. A peaceful, wooded retreat in the Pacific Northwest became the unlikely setting for a daring and chaotic crime spree. Colton Harris Moore, a 17-year-old with a troubled past, was on the run. Known as the, quote, Barefoot Bandit, he left a trail of stolen planes, cars, and boats across multiple states, often leaving behind his signature, bare footprints. How the heck did a teenager outwit law enforcement for over 2 years and capture the world's attention? This is the story of a fugitive whose exploits blurred the line between folk hero and criminal. Born in 1991, Colton Harris Moore's childhood was marked by poverty, neglect, and a volatile home life. Growing up on Camano Island, he spent his youth exploring the woods, dreaming of escape, and learning to survive on his own. By the age of 12, he had his first felony conviction. By 15, he was a runaway. Harris Moore's crimes started small, burglarizing vacation homes for food and supplies, but they escalated into something far more audacious. He taught himself to hotwire cars and later, remarkably, to fly planes by reading manuals and watching online tutorials. Over 2 years, he stole 3 aircraft, several boats, and numerous cars, leaving law enforcement scrambling to keep up. His nickname, the Barefoot Bandit, came from the footprints he left at some of his crime scenes. Harris Moore became a fugitive, evading local police, the FBI, and even Homeland Security. As his escapades grew bolder, his legend spread, and he garnered a following online, with some hailing him as a modern-day outlaw. Tracking Colton Harris Moore proved challenging. He was a skilled survivalist, disappearing into the dense Pacific Northwest wilderness when authorities closed in. His crimes spanned several states and even crossed into Canada, where he allegedly stole a plane and crash-landed it in a field. In July 2010, Harris Moore upped the stakes by flying a stolen plane to the Bahamas. His daring escape ended after a week-long manhunt on the islands. Bahamian authorities captured him after he crash-landed the plane and attempted to flee by boat. Extradited to the U.S., Harris Moore faced a litany of charges, including theft, burglary, and unauthorized flight. In December 2011, he was sentenced to over 7 years in state prison, with an additional 6.5 years for federal crimes to be served concurrently. During his sentencing, Harris Moore expressed remorse for his actions and acknowledged the pain that he'd caused his victims. The judge described his case as both a tragedy and a testament to human resilience, noting his intelligence and resourcefulness despite a troubling upbringing. Colton Harris Moore's story is both extraordinary and unsettling. How did a teenager fueled by desperation and ingenuity outwit law enforcement for so long? And what does his journey say about the allure of rebellion and the vulnerabilities of the systems that are meant to stop it? Washington State's history is marked by tales of ingenuity, resilience, and community, but beneath the beauty of its landscapes lie stories of darkness and mystery. From the chilling manipulations of a cyberstalker to the desperate crimes of a runaway turned folk hero, these cases reveal the fragile boundaries between safety and chaos. Every story serves as a stark reminder that technology can be weaponized, greed can turn violent, and even the brightest lives can be extinguished in an instant. As these stories echo through the years, we're left to wonder, what other secrets linger in the shadows of the Pacific Northwest?